Pick one person to really examine. They don't know, so there's not gonna be any self-consciousness. Take a moment to really examine someone and notice without censorship. There's no political correctness necessary or needed. That's just like the light and the sheer honesty of noticing all the different stories that emerge in your mind. Ooh, he's got books in the background. He must be real smart. She wears her hair up. Oh, did she brush it? All these great questions that you can start just noticing what's there, and just getting to be in the delight of noticing that you are a storied being. And whether you're aware of it or intentional, or whether or not you even chose the stories that are floating through your mind right now when you see this person, just getting a moment to notice that you can't help but be a storyteller. And in this moment, also, I want to invite you to take a moment to feel, what does it feel like to be seen? Someone was just checking you out, upside down, making all different kinds of stories about you. And I'm just curious for a moment just to check in. Oh, how does that feel? Are you on board with that? Does it feel comfortable? Do you feel like you've got the energetic protections? Do you feel like you've does it are you in that place where you want to be seen, or you're tentative? Just a moment to check in. Where are you in that? I also just want to give us an opportunity to check in a little question over here in terms of who's in our room today. Got a little poll for you, if you could fill it out. What's bringing you here? And these questions are, really like, you just like, I just want to receive, just give me some stories already, or is it, I'm here to really learn how to tell and build and create my own stories? As you know, we're in this kind of place around working with stories, a tool for healing and transformation and change. That's you saw that in all the copy, and I really want to know: are you here for your own creations, or also are you here because you really want to help other people and learn how to work with this tool and to work and help other people do it? Guys, I'm having a hair malfunction over here. My hairdresser gave me bangs. It's a very new thing for me. Excuse me. All right. So what are we seeing here? We see that a lot of you really want to help other people. So we've got change makers in the room. Who here identifies as someone who is like here to be a part of creating change, either in your own inner landscape or out in the outer world? This is not a trick question. Like, we're not all here to do that. I have a dear friend. She's here to dance. That's it. She's here to dance. Her name's Rosalila. She's here for play. So I just want to make sure this is not a trick question. This is just like a wondering who came here today. And a lot of you are saying, yeah, I want to work on myself. I want to know how to work with this ancient tool that is our birthright, that comes with the mechanics of one of the strongest muscles in our body that so many people don't know how to use. Others are saying, yeah, I'm here to really learn how to tell my stories, but not as many as I thought. And a lot of you are here to receive some stories. All right, well, let's get to business. And welcome, welcome, welcome to all of you who came in. Feel free to fill out that poll. I love knowing who's here. And also, if there's something, I said, bring your burning questions. If there's something that's on your mind in the realm of storytelling, sacred storytelling, please put it in your chat box. This is designed to be a live, interactive conversation, and it's so much fun when it is. And so if I know what's alive in you and where your questions are, I will do my best to go wildly off script and satiate the curiosity that's in the room. So please know that your questions are wanted and desired, and they nourish us. They really nourish us. Megan's been thinking about the role of myth in storytelling and art making. Oh, that's juicy. I love that. And Colleen is both share my soul stories and help others reach deep to share theirs. Yeah, reaching deep. I love that. Into the depths. Let's go into the depths, shall we? I'm going to pull up a, um, a presentation. And again, Mark, our dear Mark here, helped create the imagery. And I was telling him, I was like, Mark, I got these ideas, but I feel like if we could make them even cooler and bring them into full presence, then they could be that much more. And so thank you, Mark, for doing that. So we're going into a journey on sacred storytelling and really going to go over what is the landscape of sacred story, what does it mean to be a conscious creator in this time. And you guys are, we're sipping from the same stream of curiosity. How do we be part of positive social change in the times that we're living in? And I love beginning with this quote. I just want to invite you to close your eyes before, and I'll read it to you because there's something about getting to receive. And as you close your eyes, I invite you to just also breathe into your belly. Just take a moment. I know you're midday in through your day. Some of you are midday, some of you are end of day, but just take a moment to just exhale out your day. And as if you could breathe in and just breathe in the awareness that your world is made of stories. And as if you could actually do a little sifting out as you're breathing in all the stories that are here in service of your life. So this next breath, just breathing in all the stories that surround you that are in service, that feed and nourish your life. And breathing those all the way down to the bottom of your belly and exhaling out. We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us. They tell us to love or to hate, to see or be seen. And often, too often, stories will saddle us and they ride us and they whip us onward and they tell us what to do, and we do it without questioning. This is where I stop reading the quote, and I want to honor one of the teachings of one of my great teachers, Stephen Jenkinson, and this wariness of using the word we, because I don't know where you are in your journey. So there is no we among us. So I just want to honor that. I don't know, maybe you're further along, but maybe you have been held hostage by a story or two. And that's the point of this. The task of learning to be free requires learning to hear them, to question those stories, to pause and hear silence, to name them, and then become a storyteller. Rebecca Solnit. She basically encapsulated a 12-month program that I do in one paragraph. Love that. And what are we saying? That to become a storyteller, there's a process. And first you have to understand how to see the water that you're swimming in. How to actually understand that. And then there's this process of being able to see, oh, which is the one that I want to be drinking and which is the one that I don't want to be drinking, when I've been drinking it all along. Look at the language, the stream of consciousness, the stream that's coming through our social media. It's all in this language. And so when this opportunity to say, wait, which river do I want to be swimming in right now? That takes a moment to pause, to reflect, to listen, to name it, and then decide, what stories are you going to allow to live through you? And if that can be our one question today that guides us, what are the stories that you are going to practice great discernment around and allow to be lived through you? Today, we're going to go on a big journey. We're going to go a little bit into exploring the global perspective of storytelling and words, where we're going to go wide out into the old times. We're going to get on the same page. What is a story? We're going to come in and talk about what's a sacred story. We're going to get into what does it mean to be a conscious creator? What is this thing about tools for social change? How do we use story as a tool to engage healing, as a healing tool? You guys are going to ask questions along the way. You're going to take me off this into more interesting content because of who you are and what we're here to do together. And then at the end, I'm going to invite you into a big journey. So that's what we're up to today. A little bit about how I came to be with you. I learned the language of storytelling as honestly as one can without knowing it. When I got to grow up as a wild child in the wild nature of a farm in Vermont, I got to hang out with bones and rocks and rivers and creeks and wildflowers. And that is really what opened me to my true nature. And I say that because this entire journey that I'm inviting you into is to come into relationship to your own true nature through the stories that you tell. And I began to learn the responsibility of storytelling. I mean, first of all, I just fell in love with stories as a kid. I was just talking to my mom the other day, and she was like, God, you harassed us. It was like nonstop when you were a kid. Tell me a story. Tell me a story. She told me something I didn't remember. She said that one year for my birthday, she took the day off from work and dedicated the entire day to just telling me stories. So I was a story addicted from a very young age. And and it began to come into my life as a savior. You know, I ended up moving around a lot as a kid. They became to be my escape. They became to be my safe place, but they also became to be my sanctuary. It's where I learned so much more than the adults were willing to teach me. You know, John Steinbeck was one of my dads. Did anyone have John Steinbeck as a dad when they were young? Way too young to read him as a child, right? You know, but it's like, you know, I'd love to hear who were your parents, your extra godparents in the world of writing. I'd love to hear that if you can put that in the chat. So, you know, one of the things that also started to happen is that I learned at a very young age about the responsibility of storytelling, because story had been my sanctuary. That when I experienced one of the first major crises, which was my dear friend Sheila Morris committed suicide when I was 16. We were both 16. And there was not the kind of grief counseling that we have in schools. Nobody knew how to deal with it. It was just get back to school and pretend like it never happened. And I couldn't. You can't do that. Especially, you know, it's just like there's no doing that. And so I took my grief, my confusion, my pain to the one sanctuary. And I realized that it wasn't about reading other people's stories anymore. It was about making sense of my own story through writing about it. And I took that story and I ended up putting it into a play and submitting it. And it actually won a spot in a playwriting festival, and I got to see it on the stage. And that's where I learned the responsibility that what you put out into the world will come back. As I shared my grief, other people shared their grief with me. It was not a one-way directional experience. I began to learn the professional business of storytelling when I went straight to New York City, straight out of high school. I worked off Broadway. I studied with Sandy Meisner at the Neighborhood Playhouse. I worked at Summer Stock. And I had a big journey, and I was working with this one big question because in the world of theater, I could see that something was happening. We were we were building energy. Something was happening that they couldn't even get on video, and I could sense that. I wanted to like work with that energy, but every time like the door opened, it all went away, and I was like, what? But we're building, we're creating something. How do we use it? I wanted to know it. How do we use it? And I ended up doing a couple of different things where we started working with theater for social change. I had a really big influence in my life. His name was David Ball, and he was an African American lawyer working in Richmond, Virginia, who represented the KKK. And his reasoning was about constitutional rights, freedom of speech. He was making a point. And when I told him what I was doing, he said, I was going off and being in theater, he said, it's not enough. And those words, those three words, it's not enough, was like anchored into my being. He understood the power of his words, and he also understood an influential moment in someone's life. And so while I went into the world of theater, I knew that he had tapped into a true passion, which was around social justice, protecting of the earth. And I was trying to figure out how to weave those things together. I'm not going to tell you all of it. I'll tell you I got a master's in social work. I'll tell you that I had a big initiation, which I'll tell you guys about later. But I also ended up working at Current TV. And at that point, that was Al Gore's television network. It was the height of his time. He was getting all of his big awards. You know, I literally walked on the day after they won all the Emmys. And I thought that we could make major change in this place. That if we gave people the inspiration to move them to motivation, to activation, we could change the world. But I got to see all the data. And you know what the data showed me? People don't pay attention to data. They pay attention to stories. And so that singular thing was one of the things that reactivated my life, that the places where we think change is happening, it's not always right there. That oftentimes it's right in the center of our consciousness, that it's inside of the stories that we're telling every day, the stories that we're consuming, the stories that we're receiving, and the stories that we're telling. And I realized that to make real change on a global scale, that it had to start inside. So it's a little bit of my journey of what brings me to you and why I'm so passionate about storytelling. So let's get into it. Hawaiians say that words are so powerful that they can raise enough energy to slow the world or to set it into motion. If you've ever had a chance to go to Hula, go see it. The Sicilians say that words poke holes in the universe. And I always call on that in those moments when, the temperature starts to rise internally and the anger starts to get activated. And once we say things, they can't ever come back. We can't ever take them back. There's even a word in physics that speaks to the nature of language living in the place that it's spoken forever. That the resonance lives there forever. Australians say that the stories of the past need to be sung to the present so the future can exist. The Maori say the words don't describe a thing, they are the thing. And in Japanese, there's a word called kotodama, and it means word spirit. It refers to the original divine spirit of a word before it even enters into the world. And so that meaning is that words are alive and they have power, and they have power to create. Abracadabra, it's a word from ancient Aramaic mysticism. I create as I speak. So this is kind of an amazing thing, especially while living in a time of so much discord, so much separation, so much othering, right? That all of these different beings actually agree on something very central. It's about how the world was created. And all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I just want to pause for a second, because so many of us are saying, what am I doing? Why am I here? And what if we could rest on this ancient knowledge? This is not new age, think positive, which I think is a very powerful old age thought, but it's this is old ancient understanding. That all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I want to invite you to pause right now and just think about the words that you've spoken today to yourself, to others, about our world, about our times, about what's possible. And what is it to come alive so powerfully, and that you are a creator? That there are forces that will predict, but you are the creator of the world we're living in. These are some magic words. I love this poem. It's translated by Edward Field from the Inuit. In the earliest times, when both people and animals lived on Earth, a person could become an animal if he wanted to, and an animal could become a human being. And sometimes they were animals, and sometimes animals, and there was no difference. All spoke the same language. That was a time when words were like magic. The human mind had mysterious powers. A word spoken by chance might have strange consequence. It would suddenly come alive, and what people wanted to happen could happen. All you have to do was say it. Nobody could explain this. That's just the way it was. How many people experience this? I'm just curious. Do we have people among us that experience this? I was talking to Mark just yesterday. I had this wild experience where I was with a friend. We just happened to come across this outrageous concert. Sting was there playing live. This other guy, and we were like, we'd love to go in. We don't want to pay that huge amount for that ticket though. But we're like, what do you think the possibilities are that someone wants to give one away? We were really like just wondering. Long story short, somebody did. You know, and we sat there in the wondering. We spoke the possibility. We waited. It came alive. And I say that because we both have experience of those things happening. And this idea of magic words, that what we speak into being, that it feels like a story, like fiction to a lot of people, of something of the past, because it isn't something that's practiced in everyday life, that our words are that powerful. And this is just remembering it's great to have people that you can practice with. Okay, so let's get into it. What is it? What do stories do? I wanna hear from you guys for a moment. What do stories do? What is a story? I'd love to hear from you. You can put it in the chat box. You can speak it out loud. What is it? This is a great moment to also practice eloquence. Oh, I saw Chris. Was that your hand going up, or were you just doing a dance move? She was typing. Okay. What is it? What is a story?
I typed connect us.
Right. They do. They connect us. They connect us through not just our minds, right? But also through our hearts, because we can feel people. We can hear parts of their lives that we might not normally get access to when they're telling a story, because there's this space of not being interrupted, of a kind of spaciousness being allowed to live between us. It's not just information. Riva, I saw your hand.
I have a couple of thoughts floating around that what wants to come out is it's an opportunity to create a truth. It's an opportunity to create change. It's an opportunity to feel safe enough to connect.
Right. So I love what you're speaking about. And this word truth, I'm going to play with that for a moment. Truth is a term that comes from carpentry. And truth means a straight line from here to there. That means if we were all sitting around a circle and there was something in the center and we spoke to what we saw, it would all be slightly different and it would all be accurate and true. And so storytelling is a place where we can speak what we see, and other people have an opportunity to see it. What I love about storytelling is that it's not a debate, right? It's literally a sharing of an experience. It's a different way of relating. Lorna, what is a story?
Formed thought, but there's something about the coming into being of the power of words and somehow taking responsibility for the power of words.
Yeah, and that's real. That whole responsibility of the power of words. Aren't we in the middle of that right now? Here we are in a political race. You know, words are so powerful. And we're being confronted with this daily, you know. Who do we listen to? How do we listen? How are people using their words? Are people responsible for their influence and impact on other people? This is our daily, this is almost our daily bread that we are all in right now. I'm going to talk about what is a story in another way, and it's very, very not sexy, but it gets to the point. You know, it's an operating system. It's an operating system that guides us and teaches us what our belief systems are, what our values are, and what we believe is possible. So a lot of us received these stories through children's books, around the kitchen table, at school, on TV. Look, I love language. Language doesn't that won't lie. Television programming, right? Now, that is a very I was walking through Topanga Canyon where I live, and the land there is very noisy, has a lot to say. And I was, before I go on these talks, I always go for a deep listen first. And the trees weren't having it. They were just like, Leah, that is a really gross definition of stories. And I was like, okay, trees of Topanga, what you got for me if you don't like that one? And they said, well, so you should tell them the truth. And I was like, well, okay, trees, what is the truth? And they said, well, a story is a library of the soul. And I just love that piece. Wouldn't it be the trees, the carriers of books and knowledge that would drop that little piece of inspiration in? And when I think about what that means is that our stories have the capacity to hold evolutionary consciousness in them. That we can tell that the facts and information are what happens to our human experience. But our story is about the journey of a lifetime. Our story is not linear. It's not pedantic. It's not always easily understood. And yet we can make meaning our life, and we can determine what roles we play based on how we tell our story. I would say that our stories are alive and living, and they're meant to grow. They're meant to change. How many of you have gotten stuck in a story? I once, yeah, right? It's like, I don't know about you, but I once experienced a betrayal, a love betrayal. And oh my God, I just got so stuck in it. And I got stuck. It's like the washing machine. I kept repeating the same story over and over and over again. What happens when you repeat the same story over and over again is you never change. The role that you change, you don't grow, you don't do anything. So when we allow our stories to change, this happened. And when we become evolutionary soul storytellers, we are no longer the person that it happened to. We get to harvest the strength, the power, the initiation. We get to grow because of it. We get to step onto the path of becoming a wisdom keeper. And now we have a story to tell that our friends want to hear that's worth listening to. Because we have something to offer and to give. So may your stories continue to grow. Now, what's a sacred story? What's a sacred story? What do we mean when we say sacred story? You could throw something down in the chat box. There's no right or wrong answer.
It brings to mind the divine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So we're saying that something is living. Something, the divine, right? It's like we're talking about life force. We're talking about the unseen world. And when we call something sacred, first of all, it's a little bit of a trap. It's kind of weird, right? It's kind of a word that we want to work out of business, right? We want to unemploy sacred because by employing the language of sacred, we're saying, well, this sacred tree, as if it has more value than this other tree, right? It's kind of a weird thing, right? May all things be seen and experienced as sacred, where we have dignity and respect for all things. But when we look at a sacred story, we're saying, right, the divine lives in you, as Mark says, and we're saying, I see the life in you. And I see that when I walk with sacred story, I'm walking with something, another life force that's even larger than my own. So someone in here was talking about how we can feel stories, or that they open us, and that there's a caring that can happen, right? So when we're talking about a sacred story, that there's a life force that comes in, and you'll see it in people. They come alive. They become magnetic. They sparkle, and that life force can be given and shared when we come into this in a generative, generous way. Here, receive the gift of the story. May it be yours. So I'm going to come on back to this little realm of sharing my screen over here. and keep going on this little journey with you guys. And whoops, that's not where I wanted to take you. Hold on. Sorry about that, guys. Let's try that again. We're going to go here. Oh, it's really just not going to... I guess I don't get to share the... That's fascinating. I'm going to try this one more time, just because it really does want to happen. Aha! See? I can win. Okay. Thanks for your patience. So, these stories, they have a life, they have a presence, and they have a life force. And we can imagine our world as being surrounded by stories. And some of these stories are filled with love, and some of them are filled with power, and some of them are filled with fear. And so, really inviting you as a sacred storyteller, I feel like we get to put our goggles on. And it's just like when you go into the ocean. If you go into the ocean with no goggles and your eyes are closed, you're like, this is pretty good, but there's also a shark out there, and I don't know. But when you go into with your goggles, you get to really relax and enjoy and determine which way you're going to go. And that's what this feels like, is that when you understand how to see stories and how to see sacred stories, now all of a sudden your capacity to have self-determination over what stories you allow to live through you, these are energy bodies that get to live through you, then this is another way of having authorship over your own life. So they get to live through us, and we get to share them and spread them. And I kind of went through this, but sacred story, that sounds a little nice, but okay, but what's the other side then? Like, what's a zombie story? And I think of a zombie story as a story that's actually taking life. If a sacred story is giving life, if a sacred story, when you hear a sacred story, you feel happy, you feel joyful, you feel more alive. They've given you access to grief. You're going to get up and exercise tomorrow and no more sugar or caffeine because, wow, life is great and you want to be the best that you possibly can because you got all this life force in you, right? Now, a zombie story, you kind of want to die a little. Maybe it's some TV shows that you're watching or some movies about some horrible, disgusting future that you don't want to be a part of. But it's like literally the energy goes whoosh and like some of your life force is gone and you don't want to be here anymore. And I really want to invite you to really start noticing the stories that come around you and what is taking energy and what is giving energy. And one story I want to explain about a zombie story is the story of Jaws. To understand a story, you have to know its creator. In this case, it was Peter Benchley. He heard a wild story about a big white shark. He got curious. He wrote a book about it. His imagination got activated. Steven Spielberg was very early in his career. He wanted to make a movie. He knew and understood that people would look at things that they were afraid of. That's a whole other line of thought that we're not going to go down right now. This story was the very first film that was ever filmed on the open ocean. There's this quote that I just love. You might not know the old stories, but the old stories know you. And you might not speak the language of story, which is symbol, metaphor, and archetype. But that story, that way, still speaks through your consciousness because we are made of stories. We make meaning through stories. It's our first language. And so when that movie was filmed on the open ocean, and we were still so vulnerable, if you guys weren't around during then, some of you guys were, some of you guys weren't, but it was considered very violent film at the time. Now people laugh at it, but at the time it was very, very violent. And we look at what does the Jaws represent? The shark represent, but their fear of death, planted right into the ocean, which represents our consciousness. What happened globally was a massive fear of sharks and an agreement to kill off sharks, that they're some of the most dangerous beings on the world. And what we've discovered since is that that's actually far from true. More people die from falling coconuts than sharks every year. And that they're keystone species, and that our well-being is connected to them. And when Peter Benchley discovered the harm and the massacre that was happening in the ocean because of his story, he spent the rest of his life being an ocean steward. So I say that as a cautionary tale. I don't think that there's a bunch of people out there trying to do harm through their storytelling. But I really do think that at this time, as we become more and more aware of the power of who we are as creators, then we want to this is a moment to really take a good look at what kinds of stories are we telling and why, and what is it serving. And so as you look at stories, I really invite you to look at, do your stories tend to life? Do they build connection? Do they create unity? Do they leave you nourished? Or do those stories disrupt life? Are they separating us? Are they creating fear, planting anxiety? Are they leaving you hungry, wanting? These are great questions just to look through life. So I love this idea of what is a myth. It's the earth speaking out loud, says Sean Kane. So these original stories, and I happen to love these stories because myths, they're wild beings among us. They've got no author. They've somehow so strong that they have just jumped from one being to another to another to another, staying alive without any physical form of their own. Isn't that kind of amazing? They've escaped the laws of entropy. So, um, we already just talked about this. So, it's like, what is a storyteller? And who are you as a storyteller? In Japan, it's the person with the falling word. I love that. In Welsh, it's called a recounter, a guide. But also just to think about in Mesopotamia, the very first record of the very first story written was on those clay tablets, right? And what were they doing at the very beginning is they were keeping tabs. They were counting. They were recounting. So it's our relationship to our stories, our tales are connected to also our relationship to accounting, to keeping tabs, to tally. In Africa, it was the griot's role to preserve the genealogies in our traditions. In Celtic, the bard was the storyteller, the verse maker. In ancient Africa and Celtic lands, storytellers were magicians. They were initiates. They understood the underlying nature of reality. And they say that the old Celtic bards could bring out welts on the body with a string of syllables. They could heal sickness with a tale. They could breathe life into a dying civilization with the magic of a story. Ben Okri continues on about that. And I want to share just a story that I recently heard from a man who's one of the oldest survivors of the Holocaust. And he talked about, he's very jovial, very happy being. And he was talking about how he and his brother had escaped um, from the concentration camp. And we were asking them later, like, how they had the wherewithal. And they said, well, we had the love of our parents. We had the blessing and the love of our parents. And I was like, what do you mean? Because I wanted to know, was it like a formal blessing? Was it something that they did? And he was like, no, they just told us that we were the most valuable things in the world. And there was nothing that Hitler could say that could take that away from us. Our love for each other serves as protection for each other. And just a few words spoken at the right moment can heal someone, protect them, shield them from outside forces. That's how powerful we are. And so when we start talking about what does it mean to be a sacred storyteller? Well, I'm going to go out there now. Okay, we're going to go on the journey. We've got the landscape. I'm going to say it's an alchemist, that you're serving as an alchemist of earth and spirit. That here you are, this body, this material body that we know is in the absolute exact same matter to water ratio as earth has to water to matter on this planet. We're made of earth. And yet we're also connected to this unseen world. We have this thing called the imagination. And in the Kabbalah, in ancient Kabbalah teaching, it was considered secret teaching that they wouldn't reveal. That the imagination was the access point, the gateway to God. And so when we start talking about what happens when we live as connected, human, present beings connected to earth and who we are as forms of matter, and who we are as relationship to the unseen world and being creators. When we give our what comes Kotodama, those word spirits, when we ignite it through the power of our heart, right? This battery, we bring it to life. and we can change shape and matter with the power of our words. I always think of the Wright brothers, the guys that invented the first helicopter and the planes. No one had seen that before, but they did, and they spoke it, and they built it, and now look what happened. So we're alchemists. And when stories live through us, they can get stuck. They can interfere with our capacity to engage our life force. So when we talk about this capacity to be connected to earth and spirit, it's like if you end up with a story that gets stuck in your belly because you've got no power, or if you've got a victim story that's in you, or if a betrayal story came in and ripped open your heart, but when it healed, it got covered in armor, what happens to that life force energy that goes through your entire body? And so when we start talking about change, and we start talking about working with story as a tool for healing, we start using this language of evolutionary consciousness, and we start understanding that when we are whole and complete and connected, the stories that we tell are that way too, that that's what we're breathing and speaking and living into the world. So when we get access to our stories, something quite amazing can happen. We can end up in this collective energetic field where one person's story can bring healing or learning to an entire group of people. Now they don't have to learn the same lesson again, right? I love that, Chris comes in, she's going to start telling me a wisdom story about something that she learned. I don't have to make the same mistakes. I get to learn from hers. It's great. It's so exciting. I love hearing people's wisdom stories, And when we do that, it's so much can happen, but I'm not going to go down that train right now. And the other thing that happens when we start telling our story as a sacred storyteller, they're no longer our stories. When I start coming to you about the story of what it was to experience getting cancer, it's not about me and my cancer journey anymore. It's about us and the initiations that we all go through. So how you tell your story is how you live your story. So why don't I tell you a story? And I like looking at people when I tell stories. So if you do come on video, it's always so nice because I'm looking at you. And I'm gonna give you a little example of a couple of things that we talk about when we're in class. When we start talking about how do you create a place. It's like one thing that you can do is you want to create total we're not in Kansas anymore moment, meaning that you want to help people come all the way present. And I also start with a prayer. I'm going to speak the prayer first, and then I'll go into the story. And the prayer is a storyteller's prayer. It came to me when I first started telling stories, and I would see these Michael Meade and Martin Shaw tell stories, and even Carolyn Casey, and they were all they were with drums, and they had these big drums, and they were doing these invocations, and they were calling the spirit, and they were clearing the energy, and I was like, that's so cool. I don't play drums, and I'm not going to be some white Jewish girl that's going to learn how to play drums to be like them, so I was like, what do I do? And I heard, well, you sing. So you're going to hear that. And I tell you that because we all have our own way, our own unique medicine and magic of how to do that invocation, of how to call to the spirit of the story. And so I invite you, when it's your turn to tell your story, to make that simple ask. Go for a walk. Take your story for a walk and ask it. What does it need? How do you clear the energetic space so you clear out the static so that people can be fully present to be in the gift of receiving their story? Because that's what I'm praying for when I say, may all the words that need to be heard be spoken. May all the words that need to be heard be spoken. That's for you. That prayer is that whatever is alive in your consciousness, whatever is untended in your heart, may somehow the words come through me today that are in service to you. The second part of the prayer is, may all the words that need to be spoken be heard. May all the words that need to be spoken be heard. And that prayer is to the muse. that whatever she has to say today, or he or they, or whatever the spirit of is, that what wants to come alive, may it rest on ears and hearts that are open to receive. Ahi, 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 oh, ahi, oh, ahi, oh, ahi, oh. Ahi, 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 oh. Ahi, 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 oh. This story begins when I was 5 years old. There was this beautiful tapestry in my bedroom, and it was hand woven by a friend of my mother's. And it was of this woman who was selling flowers, and she was giving a bunch of flowers out to children. And on this tapestry was written, embroidered, Leah. It literally said my name, Leah. Give what you have. To others, it may mean more than you dare to think. And I remember I was just learning how to read, and so I would read it over and over and over again. Leah, give what you have. It may mean more to others than you dare to think. And I had no idea what that meant until I was sitting across the desk from a doctor who had just handed me a very, very thick document that he was asking me to sign. He had just taken a test that had diagnosed me as having a very rare and fast-growing thyroid cancer. And as he gave me this diagnosis and this paperwork to sign, like 5 minutes later, it all, like everything came through. Everything came through me. And something that you don't know about my story that I haven't told you about is that up to that point, I had mastered the victim role. I had learned it through fair and good ways, but I really learned all the words, and it had gotten to a point where I had actually gotten to figure out how it could serve me. It was really a way that I got to get a lot of attention that I wasn't getting in the places that I wanted and needing them from. So I knew the words just well. I could act out victim story anybody in the room. It had become like kind of like a professional act. And all of a sudden, here was this doctor, and he was coming to me with this contract, which also kind of was like this beautiful purple velvet pillow with a tiara of victimhood on it, and he was handing it to me. And that's when all of a sudden, some part of my soul came on board. And it was like, oh, hell no, I won't go. And all of a sudden, it was as if this little window just arrived, and I could go through the escape hatch into another story. Because all that I knew was that I was no longer going to play that role ever again in my life. I also didn't have a clue what was on the other side. And it turns out it wasn't all tears, it was laughter. Because when he said, they're going to cut across my larynx and there's a good chance they could take away my voice, I started laughing, and I said, oh, you just tell that to all the pretty girls, don't you? I don't know where that came from. It wasn't even me. It's like something else came over, but all of a sudden, this new role that I was playing had a job. And the job was to make sure that there was a way for me and whoever I was with could laugh at all along the way. Every nurse, every time they drew blood, every doctor, we laughed. That was the job. I was terrified. I had more terror in my body than I had ever known before. I never had felt so out of control in my entire life, and all I wanted to do was control everything, and I couldn't. I remember crying as they put me under anesthesia, not knowing what my life would be like on the other side. When I came out, they came to me with this mirror, and they were like came to me very tentatively, kind of scared, and they said, we just need to tell you it was a very long operation, about twice as long as we expected. It's a much bigger scar, much bigger than we expected, and they said it's sort of like like a hockey stick. And I looked in the mirror and I looked like Frankenstein. It was black stitches all down my neck and across my way. And I said, you monogrammed my initial backwards on my neck. And they were like, who comes out of anesthesia making jokes? And I didn't even know who that was. I didn't know who she was. I can tell you that they gave me the wrong medication. Nobody knows how to give people thyroid medication when they take out thyroids. It's different for every single person. In my case, they gave me speed. I came out of the hospital dancing. I had so much energy. I asked all my friends to come over to my house and help build me a 70-foot garden. And they said, Leah, you're crazy. And I said, I know, but I've got all this energy. Please help me use it. And so we did. We built this 70-foot spiral garden. And soon enough, as you might imagine, the drugs that were giving me speed, all of a sudden I was in an extreme state of exhaustion. And I went into a deep depression. And all the people who I thought were supposed to be there didn't know how to be there. And all of a sudden, what I really had as my constant every single day was that garden. Because I lost my capacity in knowing how to be with people. The change that was happening in me was so big that I wasn't who I was anymore, and I didn't know who I was becoming. But I did have my bare feet on the earth every day. And that garden taught me something that no human had ever taught me before. It taught me about gratitude. And I didn't know gratitude before that time. And every morning I would get up and I would walk the cycle of that garden. And I would just be thankful for life. Even though it wasn't the life that I really wanted to be living, I was so tired. And every day I walked out of that cycle with my dreams, with my prayers, with my knowledge that being able to have a voice was a gift. And with that gift came a great responsibility. And with that responsibility comes great power. And that prayer, that's what brought me to you. And so if you find yourself in a dark and stormy night, and your ship has sunk, and everything that you knew is gone, and you're floating alive and half dead in the mystery. May the earth rise from beneath you. May the seas part, and may the moon cast her light and create a path that you can follow all the way home. So that is your story. That's your story for today. And I'm just going to point out a couple of things, because I wrote that story in 5 minutes, and you can create a story in 5 minutes too. Where does your story really begin? That's not for you to say, it's for you to wonder about. What was the initiation that's a universal initiation that you went through? You didn't know it at the time, but looking back, you can see things that you couldn't have known. Who was your Yoda or your fairy godmother? Every story of great change has one. It's someone outside the family system, and it's not always in human form. And then the quick and dirty ending, I learned through Carolyn Casey, who learned it from John O'Donohue, and it's a story blessing. You take the metaphor of what you created and you give it back in the form of a blessing. So it's a simple recipe for how to create a wisdom story. And the greatest thing I can offer you is that at the time, you don't know the story because the story is no longer yours. It's ours, it's bigger than you. And so you let the story tell you. Now, that's kind of a bigger thing. You need time and space and a great community to do that. And that's what we do at the School for Sacred Storytelling. Um, this is, the end of the teaching part of our time together. But if you've come into a place now, can you guys hear that in the background? You can. Isn't that amazing? The house where I'm staring, they have an answering machine. Can you believe that? I haven't seen it. I haven't heard an answering machine in like forever and a day. Anyway, I can't turn that off. But what I was going to say is I'm going to, I'll do about 10 minutes of introducing you guys into the world of the School for Sacred Storytelling. And so if you would like to learn about that, that's what I'm going to be doing in this next couple of moments. And it's also one of my favorite parts of doing. I'll have a couple more questions, and I have a survey for you first, though. If you can hold on, because I've got this big survey for you that I want to give you, and so I'm going to tell you something before you go. We're about to do something radically different, and we're about to offer a course we've never offered, and I'm curious if you guys are interested. So that's why I want to put this out there. This is about the story of politics. But it's not politics, it's bigger than that. Oh, it's not going to let me do it. Apparently, I can only tell one poll at a time. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you guys to. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me see if I can do that. We're looking at creating a very short story for a short class during the time of the political race that would bring us into an opportunity to ask questions and live in the world of story outside of politics as we know it. So it would be looking at the political realm as through the lens of myth, metaphor, symbols. And just to give you, I can't tell you all the guest teachers, but Jean Houston just signed on to be part of it. And so if that's something that you guys are interested in terms of being with a group of journeyers who are journeying through this political race and looking at it through the realm of story, not of right and wrong, not of Republican, Democrat, not even, it's not about that. It's about really what is it to be storied beings living through one of the biggest stories of our time. If that's something that you're curious about or want to know more about, I'm just curious and would love if you put a yes in there, then and that just tells me if you guys are into that. And I meant to have a poll for you guys, but apparently it won't let me put more than one poll during a class, which is so annoying. Okay, so here we go. Thank you for your patience while I deal with that one little technical thing. So here is the big question that I have for you today, which is, when we're looking at this, it's like, this is the thing that as we walk in this world of sacred storytelling, what does it mean to be creators during times of chaos, and how do you get to really, really, truly thrive during that? We have 3 different ways that you can do that. One of the things that I like to understand is, what's trying to emerge through you. And as you do that, where do you really want to grow? And really ask yourself, is it as a storyteller? Is it understanding the mechanics of story as a tool for growth? Is it, being a facilitator of change? Is it creating the kinds of environments where people can catch stories that can create transformational experiences? Is it really getting attuned to how to use your voice and create environments where people can hear you? These are just a couple of things that we do inside these classrooms. And as you know, and as we got there, your stories, there should be like trees. They're designed to grow. We don't want them to get stuck in the form of a sapling. And so in the world of School for Sacred Storytelling, just to give you a little history, some of you guys know and have been here for a long time, like Lorna and Riva and Mark. We've had over, gosh, by now I think it's over 50 guest teachers that have come through, probably over 1,500 students that have come through our different, paid classes, free classes, and are really in this world of what does it mean to be a sacred storyteller at this time. And the three big things that, we have to offer you right now is we've got live courses, which they're live and interactive because it's a team sport, and in that you get a really interactive, vibrant community. For those of you who are saying, I just want to study on my own, we have a whole new series that I'm just about to launch, which we haven't done a lot of study on your own classes. We have monthly memberships, and we also have private coaching. I want to mention about the private coaching, which is that one of the things that we do in that realm is that I offer private sessions as a soul stories, but I love playing matchmaker to help you find your perfect coach. I've been someone who I've, produced large events, I've written books, I've had to find editors, I've had to find the right coaches, I've had to do all of it. It's really wonderful when you get to go to one trusted source and have someone help guide you to other great coaches. So whether it's with me or you're trying to find that perfect person, it's a great way to use your discovery session. And that's what I'm going to suggest that you do. So one of the things that we've got coming up right now is the Alchemy of Story program. And this program it's a big journey. And it's a journey that we've been developing for, over 8 years. And what happens is, if you think of it like a tree, we start at the bottom. The first module is all about getting to the essence, getting to your essence, the truth, your true nature. And we do that by learning some of the oldest stories on earth, from your personal lineage, from origin stories from your land, to your actual soul story. Then we go into understanding your wisdom stories and what are the major crises that you've had in your life, and how do we clear those life force blocks so you get access to your life force power. We'll go into the heart, into medicine stories, learning how to call on story as a prescription. What if you could call for the exact healing that you need in the form of a story? We work with it as using your voice for social change, and in doing that through teaching stories and through vision stories. We have some amazing guest teachers at that time. And then also really getting to the soul of who you are as a storyteller through a program called Story as Ceremony. So the journey of the Alchemy of Story is 5 modules. And you can take those modules in 2 different ways. You can take them as 6-week courses where we meet every week for 2-hour classes. Or you could say, I want to do an intensive where we meet every 4 months for 3.5 days. So you have an option. We've noticed that some people have less time and that intensive is really good, and some people have less time and the 2-hour segments are really good. That's all what story you're in. So in terms of for what are we up to here, we're up to really engaging story as a place for true self-realization. And in every class that you'll have, I like this. Like, I didn't even do. I love how it's like I've been thinking we're going for the gold, and look, the Olympic thing just happened to show up as I created this today. But it's like that is kind of what we're doing. Is like we're saying, where is a place where you can practice to be your greatest version of yourself? And in these classes, you work with these small groups, which is called your group of greatness, where you get to work with and integrate everything that we're learning as groups. You get an online community. You have we get to do story festivals at the end of every 6-week class, and then every class is very live, interactive. I never talk this much in any of our classes. It's really about being in small groups and getting to do all of your own work and getting to be seen, heard, witnessed, and be in a place of practice. Our every class has 3 guest teachers, and in those guest teachers, you're going to have one teacher that brings you an indigenous perspective, the place where you get the transmission from the old storytellers. You're going to have world-class storytelling teachers, and you'll also have a healer. And so in this, you get this really interesting alchemy of what is it to work with story as a tool for change. This is a taste of some of our guest teachers who are coming up this year. And we'll actually even have many more. What you're seeing here is just award-winning authors, writers, MacArthur geniuses, leaders in their fields, just truly stunning humans that I am just so incredibly honored to get to collaborate with and to being with stories of our time. And these are a couple of alumni that have come through. And Alana came through and she said this course sparked a massive explosion of inspiration and deluge of creativity. She's come out since then. She's written her own book, and she actually ran for city council. Gil says, I've noticed my voice is changing out in the world, my willingness to go places I've never gone before and take many chances to be more unknown in what I'm doing. It's different. He works as in the world of sustainability. LaShonda was talking about how she's able to work with my own real life story in an empowered way that helps me bring closure to an old trauma I'd suppressed for years. She said if I could do it over, I'd take this class 1,000 times again. And Alora, who I worked with in private coaching, she said, I finally found my true voice, which has transformed my life in ways I never thought imaginable. Alora was she was making animation characters, and she really got attuned to how she could share. She was dealing with how to talk about mental health through animation. And she created this incredible process of working with young people through anxiety. And she's created this entire business around it. She's really something. She's really, truly standing in the truth of who she is. So that's what we're up to. We're on to this journey. We're starting in September. And in between now and then, there are 3 more classes, and we're taking on some of the great stories of our time. And these stories are, um, looking at how to be sorry guys how to be how to come so completely alive in the realm of being change makers, both in our own lives and in the lives of others. And to me, I don't know about you guys, but there's no other place I'd want to be, is in a room of people who are aware of how powerful they are, who want to be around other people who are also creating real change in the ways that matter. And whether that's in the lives of your families, in the lives of your coworkers, in the lives of future generations, that's where we're playing. And so what I'll give you over here is I'll give you a couple things. For everyone, what I'll tell you is that our early bird ends tomorrow, and that saves you 15% on the whole course. So if you're like, wow, I know that I want to do this, this is a great time to jump in. And what I'll give you right here is I'll give you the link to schedule a discovery session. And that's really kind of the best way to go forward. Where if you're like, is this for me? Then find out now. And thank you, Stephen, for pointing out. I know I caught that typo right as I was reading it to you guys. Darn it. um, and here, this is the link to schedule a one-on-one session. So if you're saying, I think I'm into this, but I've got questions, and how does it really work? And do I do the 6-week course or the 3.5-day course? And we also have a certification program for those who are saying, I just want to do it for me. That's there. And a lot of you said, actually, I really want to help other people. We have a certification program, and I can explain that more in one-on-one sessions. The other thing that we have here is that we have a monthly membership. And this monthly membership is pretty darn fun. And we meet 3 times a month. And I'm working with a new guy who's helping me explain everything. He's saying I should call it the lunatic membership because we meet by the phases of the moon. And so on the new moon, we do what's called a soul story. It's an old ancient form of divination storytelling. On the full moon, we co-create vision stories. It's improv, it's fun, it's really about working out your mythic imagination. And then in the middle of all that, we have a creative jam. And it's a place where you get creative prompts and can create in community, or you can bring something that you're working on and get some feedback from a really supportive community. So that is all there. And if you're just like, I want a taste, I want a sampler, I'll send you a link when we're done. The next, we're doing 3 more stories. We're taking on the story of purpose, we're taking the story of money, and we're taking on the story of health. And in those 2-hour classes, you'll have an opportunity to just learn about some very tangible skills and techniques to really work with some of the most powerful tools that are after us in the Western civilization. So that's our story for today. I'll hang out for a little bit for any questions, but if you want to sign off and say goodbye, I invite you to take yourselves off mute, say farewell, and I look forward to being with you soon.
Thank you, Leah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Leah. It was wonderful as always. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Got to ask.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. If you want to place in the chat box anything that you are taking away with you, then that can be a way for all of us to remember. Oh, look at all of your yeses. I love that. Okay, that's enough to get us into getting into that kind of thing.
Leah, you're still my favorite antidepressant.
Thank you.
I smile all through when you speak. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Always a pleasure to see you, Lorna. All right, I'm going to turn off